Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker. With me, as always, is Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. We're excited for our guest today.
And we should probably let her introduce herself. So, Catie, if you'd be so kind.
Yes. Hello. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Catie Chase. I'm a life coach, and I've been an educator for 20 years as a school learning specialist and as an independent educational consultant.
Oh, gosh. I can't imagine why we had you on the podcast.
I just can't imagine how much fun we're going to have today.
We just spin the LinkedIn wheel and whoever it comes up on.
Yes. I love it. That's great.
So, Catie, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, I've just been so blessed to have an incredible career as a neurodiverse learner myself. Many of us find ourselves going into the field of education and supporting others. So my story is quite common, and I've been so fortunate. I actually started my career in wanting to work in community colleges and supporting adults with learning disabilities. At that time, those were the words that we used in the 90s and the 2000s. So neurodiversity has really taken flight. And to how I share with my students and clients is neurodiversity is how we do things, dream, innovative creativity. We just do things differently and with our hearts. My career was impacted by the Great Recession, and I wasn't able to complete my PhD. So I pivoted, like many students have to do, especially neurodiverse students have to do. And I fell into falling in love and supporting students on their student journey from community colleges to a 4-year college, whether it was in California for public schools or private schools. So really just looking at the student journey, which we all have. And so for about 5 years, I was on my own solo. That's what we do in America. We figure it out. We go for our dream. And as the economy got a little better, some people had shared with me, you'd be excellent in a school community and supporting neurodiverse learners. Really think about that. So I kind of opened up my goals a bit and considered middle school, high school, and I found a wonderful home. So I was a school learning specialist for 10 years in West LA. That really pulled me into living and seeing this student life every single day and being in a high achieving environment, and how quickly neurodiversity and the conversations in the classroom with parents have transformed over the last 10 years. You can see why my heart was led to coaching, because this is really about creating life skills and learning how to push through the stopping points that we have on our journey. Yeah, I could keep going, but
It's so absolutely keep going.
Oh, yeah. So as a school learning specialist, it's a little different in the independent school community. I'm a public school kid myself. So having had an IEP and a 504 all the way up through graduate school, I was definitely coming in with a different lens and how to really support both middle school and upper school divisions, which was a beautiful lifespan of 11 to 18. And then having my private practice from about 15 to 25-ish. So I didn't mean to have such a long lifespan in supporting the student journey, but you can see where every developmental space and milestone has its unique challenges and blessings along the way. And so in supporting my students who are incredibly passionate, gifted, learning about your neurodiversity is really figuring out what is working and not working, and how do I best support myself to living an authentic life. So kind of like a real coach, an athletic coach, because so many people play sports and they love athletic coaches in this country. I just use it. Okay, well, as a life coach, it's the same way, except I'm helping you create a game plan for your life, right? And here's your toolbox for success. So a lot of times students would come into my office being dysregulated. As we know how difficult school is, the daily life of school, it's exhausting. I would tell parents, you just don't remember how exhausting it is. And students would not have tools in the moment to use in the here and the now as we're living in the present moment. And as I would read all the neuropsych reports throughout the city and so forth, a lot of them just have these standard recommendations that have no meaning. When you really put them into a playbook for success, they kind of just fizzle out because parents and professionals perpetuate a lot of problems. And when you're a learning specialist in a school and you're supporting the life of a student, you really are in a game, the game of life, in the here and the now. So in my office, on a whiteboard, on the back of a napkin, on the back of a math test, I would just draw a box and I said, okay, here is your modern toolbox for success. And you have 3 columns. The first pillar is your health and well-being. This isn't that hard. I didn't make all this up. I'm just pulling all the resources together and offering it to the student, say, look, you have choices. And this is why it's not working. This is why it is working. I'm coaching them on how to observe. What a beautiful life skill to have, despite the misfortune and the blessings in life, right? And so really for them to have a kind visual to assess what's working for me, not working for me, and that my health and well-being. Next is my connection and my belonging, which are my relationships. And the next column is the learning and the growth. We can't even get to the academics and the learning and the growth until we have stability, structure in health and well-being, connection and our belonging, and then we can have access to our brilliance. On the bottom of that toolbox for success is where I'm integrating the life coaching skills. And about 2 years ago, I went back to school myself because life coaching is a profession that is very near and dear to me because I'm able to coach and support a student or parents as they're supporting their children to observe. Really, it's about learning how to look, see, tell the truth, and take authentic action. And it's quite a simple formula that whether you're a student or a CEO, these are life coaching principles that can be integrated so that we don't have to suffer and struggle as much as we do. So I think that the toolbox for success was so powerful in my experience and why I wanted to make it accessible to everybody. And it's centered around the first book that I'm writing for students is because it helps foster the self-agency and to bring a child into the conversation of what is working and not working allows them to see the choices and make the choices. A lot of parents are not always as truthful with their child's profile. And this was the only way that I could say, okay, well, here's what your brain looks like, right? A brain with ADHD is functioning at this level. Yet, if you look at your toolbox for success, you're going to see a dumpster fire in the health and well-being, right? So many students would go get a Frappuccino across the street from Starbucks and not have any food and then take a chemistry test shaking like this. So how is that going to contribute to your success when you've been working so hard towards these goals? So it wasn't just my extra time, because that's where I would get the habitual, oh, I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough time. So I explained, well, having extra time is a tool. If you don't know how to use that tool, that's the skill set that you're working towards. And that's what we call in life coaching your point of mastery. Where on our journey, we all have a point where we face an obstacle and a challenge. And the resiliency comes from, what do I do now? How do I overcome this? How do I go through it? How do I go over it? How do I pivot to the side? And that's what it means to be a hero on your journey. When we think about Joseph Campbell's work, this is all weaved into AA, into therapeutic practices, and to really supporting how we can have a new perspective and forge ahead.
I love that language of be your own hero, right? Because I think a lot of kids in particular are given a lot of messages that it's like, you're just a kid. The grown-ups will help. The grown-ups will save the day. And it's like, you look at the movers and the shakers, they either started young because they weren't taking no for an answer, or you look at, a lot of the kids now who are just saying like, I'm not going to wait for the adults. I'm going to do it my own way. And when you empower a kid to put their hands on the steering wheel of their own lives, then you're basically saying like, you don't need to wait for anybody to start this journey. You can find helpers along the way, right? I mean, Frodo had Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes. Oh, yes. Our words, we have so many examples. Yes.
Right? And that's just it. I mean, it's so important to make recovery and treatment an active process.
Yes.
Not, well, golly gee, I sure hope somebody comes and helps me.
Yes, correct. No, action actually heals the soul and the spirit because we're putting momentum into physical reality. And I think teenagers and young adults are so grateful when an adult says, I hear you, I see you, and here are the facts. Here is the science. Here is the research. And now this visual of the toolbox. What is your agency? What are your choices? Here are the natural consequences, right?
I mean, absolutely. You mentioned before that you're a public school kid, right? And I'm a public school kid, right? And Jake, you are too, right?
Yep.
I thought so. And it's funny, a lot of times I think people who do the work that we do, we get accused of undermining or being anti-public school, right? And I mean, like, first off, we got three very successful humans here on this podcast, all public school kids.
My kids go to public school. I have a 10th grader and a 7th grader. It's not about where you go.
It's not about where you go.
Nope.
It's about understanding the systems and understanding how to leverage them to get what your kid needs.
Absolutely. I have girls in Africa using my toolbox. This is universal. This is just being human, Dr. Matt.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? It's beautiful.
And I think that's a great way to push back on this sort of neurodivergence as like it's special, right?
Yeah.
It's a question of equity.
Correct.
Everybody needs what they need, right? And they should get what they need.
Yes. And how powerful it is to know what it is that I need and to make the choice. I don't want that. Even though I hear you, Miss Chase, I need that. That is still a choice. And for me to take that choice is free will. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay. We go back onto our path and figure out a new solution. And that's just what it means to be human, creative, resilient, and independent. And those are what we need to survive in this life.
Listening to you say that, like you used the word authenticity before, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a single thing that unites the entire neurodivergent community, is that we are allergic to bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. The reason I hired Jake, we met working at an independent school years ago, but I was like, this is a no bullshit person.
Yeah.
He is always himself.
It's who I need on my team. It's who we need on our team to be creative and innovative. What do you think CEOs need? This is why neurodiversity is such a big conversation for the workforce. What an exciting time to be in our shoes, Dr. Matt.
Absolutely. Because CEOs are surrounded by yes people, right?
Yeah.
Since we are allergic to bullshit, we're going to be the person in the room that's like, boss, that's a terrible idea. Somebody should have stopped putting this generative AI in Google because it's awful.
Yes.
A neurodivergent person would be like, nah.
Mm-mm. You should see me struggling writing my own first book as I'm typing and speaking and writing to myself as I write. Nope, it will just take me 3 more years, but that's okay.
You'll do it. That's the important part.
Good things take time, that's for sure.
Good things take time.
Jake, why don't you take the next question, bud?
Ooh, okay. I had a few different questions, and one that kind of jumped out to me the most was probably, what are some of the commonalities that you've seen and you've noticed between the public school students, the private school, the independent school students, and just like what they need depending on what their various neurodiversities show up like?
Oh, excellent question. Well, I work with people over the country, but because I'm about an hour north of LA, it's a very interesting population. We have so many more choices today for education than ever before. So no child looks alike, as we know. No child comes from the same school in terms of the same programming, the same grades. Grades are inflated in this country. They're not the same. There's some schools that won't give below a 50% floor grading, where other schools, like my own kids, are in a California public school, and 85% of my daughter's geometry grade is the finals and testing. So it's like we go to barbaric teaching times, and then there's other communities and cultures that have modern standards for education. So I'm really witnessing a very interesting framework of so many different structures of knowing what parents believe to be the best educational fit environment for their child. And then we're recovering, as you know, from the pandemic and all the things. So for neurodiversity, depending on what school and environment you're in, I always tell families and students that, your success is dependent upon the resources, the community that you are attending. And so really getting to know, what did I just sign up for? What am I committing myself to? What can this community do to support me? And how am I going to contribute and be a partner? Because schools need partners as parents, right? First and foremost. So I think when you can understand, okay, the mission, the culture of the school, understanding my child's identity, needs and wants and wishes. What I love about the toolbox is that a parent or a grandparent, an auntie, a tutor, a mentor, a coach can take that, and you can use that to have those conversations that are respectful, wholesome, empowering, kind and gentle to, once again, illustrate that as you're a learner who's advancing into middle school and high school, it's very exciting. You're engaging in different social activities and new different learning communities. So there's going to be different challenges there in that arena. Whereas in the academic arena, some schools will place you where you need to be. Other schools, you have more variety and option. You can advocate or appeal for the classes that you want. So when we're talking about neurodiversity, I have some students that are so brilliant and gifted, they could probably go teach at Stanford right now, right? But the social communication skills, we're working on third grade, fourth grade skills, right? And so it just really, really depends on, again, what's working for you or not working for you and where you are on your journey. And for students, and what I appreciate about life coaching and what I share with parents is that in order to be successful, we need to take sweet, small steps. Humans are so inclined to take large ones, 250 steps ahead. And we're just not programmed or designed to be successful in that way. And so sharing with students the coaching tools and with parents that they need to reframe, to reset is so important, because this is a long journey, not a quick one. I mean, the Race to Nowhere came out in 2009 when I was a new mother. And the fact that it's 2024, and then only now the Surgeon General is just saying that it's a crisis. I mean, trust me, I'm going way into it into my book. So it's not easy at all to be a parent or a student today. And I think that negotiation, conversation, having the compassion and the courage to lean in, and that it's an ongoing conversation day in and day out as you're growing and emerging and experiencing new challenges. We don't grow without feeling uncomfortable. And so oftentimes, this is where I say parents and professionals are part of perpetuating a problem where our kids aren't growing in some areas. I have students who show up who don't know how to write a sentence, but they have straight A's in APs and honors classes. I'm quite confused and concerned.
You used a lot of words like kindness and compassion. And it's funny because I think a lot of people would take that to mean you can't give critique, you can't give criticism.
Oh, I'm a warm demander.
Oh, let's clone you, right? I mean, I tell my clients all the time, I love you, I'll run through a brick wall for you, but I'm not your friend. My job is to help you get better. And that means I'm going to be the person who gives you a hard truth. I will give it to you kindly. I will give it to you with a big old hug,
Oh, yes.
right? But we've lost the ability as a society to say, hey, you need to get better at this thing to have the life you want. Instead, like, you're getting an A in my AP class, but you can't write a sentence.
Yes.
There's no world where those two things should be aligned, right? I mean, I guess maybe if it's AP art, don't let me rabbit hole on that.
Well, we're finding that a lot of teachers aren't wanting to give written assignments because of AI, and that it's increasing cheating issues, because then now department chairs and deans are so busy with regulating vaping and AI cheating that now what I'm hearing and noticing, just even in this short year, 18 months, that the teachers are fundamentally changing how they're giving instruction.
It always makes me think of the line from Jurassic Park, right? Yeah, Jake, I don't think we've ever had a podcast where I haven't made some antiquated pop culture reference.
Love it.
Because it's when Jeff Goldblum says, you were so busy wondering if you could, you never stopped to think if you should, right? And AI it's the genie's out of the bottle. We can't put it back in.
Yep.
So the reality is it's another thing we've given to our teachers and said, y'all got this, right? You can figure this out.
Right.
And the repercussions for all the beauty and wonder that AI can give us.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the conversations from the chat GPT folks are almost like painfully naive. Like,
Yeah.
the first thing I ever Googled was how to do better at math homework. Right. I mean, come on. Like, let's pull our heads out of the sand here a little bit, folks.
Yeah, it's an incredible tool. It needs to be trained and taught as a tool, like a calculator, just like any other advancement of technology. And I can see its benefits, but we just don't have the training and it takes consistency, Dr. Matt, right? We know this 101 and everything we do, structure, routine, consistency, and it's just already taking away their space to create the language. Words are frequency. It expresses meaning and it releases what you're thinking and feeling. And we know that reflection and writing by 42% allows us to make our dreams and goals come true. So the fact that we're taking the writing away is heartbreaking. But again, I just sprinkle in where I can the research and the science. And if this is your goal over here, here's where you have to do. Right. And there's going to be a lot of distractions. We live in a society that's really focused on driven behavior. We would rather do things until we're just exhausted and burnt out. And we think that that's success. That's not success. Success is how Dr. Maria Nemeth frames it. She's the founder and director of Academy for Coaching Excellence, where I went to my life coaching school. I call it the Harvard of Hogwarts because it was really intense. Okay. Like I chose my career, my whole life to stay away from testing and becoming credentialed globally. Yes. So, but her definition of success is really what made me align myself with that program because I looked at UC Davis. That was too academic. I already went to the UCs for graduate school. I was really looking for spirituality. Can I say that? Because that is another component that's critical to self-awareness, to getting to where you want to go. And it's gone. It's disappeared. And so Dr. Maria says success is saying what you said you were going to do consistently with clarity, focus, ease, and grace. And how gentle and beautiful is that to break that down and understanding those qualities of being and how I'm showing up in the present moment. So I'm not successful if I'm showing up to an AP US history class where I know I've just made myself take a few more extra classes because I want to get into the best college possible, right? That's the logic. And then a student coming into my class completely dysregulated because they ran out of their extra time because they didn't know how to use the extra time now with the new skills and level of competing with that knowledge and that skill set. Yeah. So.
And I like your choice of the word spirituality there, right? Because I think that's a word that means a lot of things to a lot of people. Like I was raised Catholic and
I'm raised Christian.
very into it for a minute. And I was that kid being a gifted ADHDer. I would be like, well, hold on a second, because you guys are telling me these things, but also you're telling me these things, and those things don't work together. So help me rationalize it. And they literally like don't ask those questions. And I'm like, oh, that's not going to work for me.
Oh.
Right. Like, and I'm not here to dunk on religion, right? Because it's helpful to so many people. So people say, oh, so then once you broke with the Catholic Church, you became an atheist. I was like, oh no, I still have a concept of God. It is very helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I are Unitarian Universalists. That's the room I sit in to think about.
Mm-hmm.
The way I put it to my clients, right? And whatever that looks like for you, if it is a thing that brings you solace and peace and grace, then I would argue it has to be a part of your recovery plan, your treatment plan, not just, boy, it sure would be nice if we could.
Absolutely. Because I work with a lot of students who are in recovery and drug addiction because with marijuana being legal in California, you don't think that that's a perfect gateway for ADHD kids. I've never seen so many kids who've had to have inpatient, outpatient treatment and support. And so this was another reason why I stepped into becoming a life coach, and not just any life coach, but the study of ontology. And that's the nature of being human. And that's where you can't take spirituality of being human because we're here. So you and I are connected and we're more alike than different. And when you realize that that's a universal truth, you just see the world in a different way.
I don't know if you saw Jake's eyes bug out of his head when you said ontology. I'm like, you are the biggest word nerd I know. And you were like, Do you want to nerd about ontology for a second?
Oh, I would end up going on for way too long because ontology, philosophy are like the things I'm too far into.
Okay, we're gonna have to have another conversation. That's amazing. That's great. Yeah.
It's like the word of the day in Pee-wee's Playhouse.
It is. Who knew?
My whole like apartment just starts freaking out. Picture starts coming off the wall.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a great example. This is where I had an aha moment and I didn't realize how much I love learning and I missed it. Being a school learning specialist, you're learning and growing, but then to be a student again, it's been a beautiful thing. The title of my book I've had for years, but I just made one shift, and it's because I'm now a life coach, not an educator. In the psychological educational context realm, we use specific words, cultural contexts that defined our living times right now. So psychology is our beliefs, our thoughts, our ideas, our structures of knowing, and they're all based on where we're from, our families, all the things, right? Ontology is a study of being. It has no labels. It has no conditions. And the beauty of that when you're working with neurodiversity is that it's not about your gender or your diagnostics. It's about who you are. Well, how do you know who you are when you've never been asked or taught to view yourself in this way? What is a core value? What is the North Star, right? What does it mean to be I am willing? That's the most potent energy that humans can have when you open yourself to being willing. So as a learning specialist and as an educator in my book, there's one word where I kept wanting to say managing, toolbox, managing. Students have to managing, right? As an educator, psychologist, as a parent, oh gosh, manage your shit. As a life coach, the word is mastering. You're learning how to be the captain and the master of your hero's journey. And that's where the learning process never ends, and that goals are just a continuation of one cycle after another.
Man. So, can I ask what the title of your book is?
Yes. Understanding Me, a modern girl's guide to mastering her neurodiversity with grit and grace.
Oh man, I need a fainting couch. Oh, I mean, bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, Jake, do you get the sense that like at some point we're going to be like, can you believe we had Catie on our podcast? Like when she's like hobnobbing with Oprah or on The View someday.
Very kind of you.
We know her.
Thank you. You're too kind.
I mean, that is absolutely it.
Yeah, it just came from my heart, to be honest. And those are the best ways. That's when you know you're doing something much bigger than yourself. Look, this is my life's calling. I wish I could just be eating bonbons and not be giving. Sometimes, it's just like it's exhausting. But, when you work with so many students and families and you hear the same stories, you go through the same experiences. I was able to create a class at the last 2 years of my career. I created it. All right, an executive functioning class. We know what a learning specialist role is, right? It's the managing of shit. So I was not a life coach at that time, but definitely the spirit of coaching has been around since Greek mythology, right? So whatever class you're creating or sport team you're creating, you're coaching, mentoring, and supporting somebody else. And that's what allows the whole network to be most successful. So essentially, my book is the class that I taught the last 2 years, and I have been studying and integrating the life coaching skills and principles as an educator, thinking, what does a student need on their journey in the here and the now? So many students have blended families. They don't live in the same place. A lot of children have adult lives and have to make adult decisions in this new modern era. I actually saw Esther Perel in LA last week. She's an incredible therapist who focuses on marriages and relationships. I have no doubt that I'll be writing a second book for young adults about modern dating and intimacy and how to have relationships, because I'm coaching a few young men right now, and about 26 to 32. I mean, growing into adulthood is going to take our children an extra 8 years, Dr. Matt. Have you read that in the research? This is what I'm reading. And so this is going to impact our economy, our retirement, our ability to really, it's just going to look different. And not that that's wrong. It's just going to require us to think differently in how we're supporting our students to think about each stage of their life.
And there's a thing there that I think is so relevant. We live in a society that puts a lot of sex out there. right? Like,
Oh, yes.
I mean, like how many shows end with the couple gets together and like, and it's the sort of thing, but it's also like we're weirdly not allowed to talk about it.
Mhm.
And one of the things that drew me to therapy, the therapeutic process, even as a kid, was it was a place where I could talk about the questions that I had that nobody wanted to answer.
Yes.
Like, what is the deal with this whole sex situation, right? And like you, I like learning, right? I want to know the thing, right? And people are like, oh, that's so lecherous. I mean,
Well, especially sex for neurodiversity people. Now we're getting to that's a whole nother podcast show, my friend.
book it immediately, and we won't book it at 6 a.m. California time. I wrote I don't know if it's still the only, but the first sex education protocol for neurodivergent learners, right? And there's K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12.
Mhm.
Each one of those groups has different needs, right? And we had a meeting about it, and people were like, oh, so you want to talk to my kid about blowjobs? And I looked at it, I was like, your kid is 5. It would be inappropriate for me to talk to your kid about blowjobs. Jake, are you covering your face because you're like, I have to edit the word blowjobs out?
No, 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 not because of that.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That structure of knowing. Do you see we're becoming a life coach is my saving grace? Because now I can see the parent, because when we're parents, we are recovering our own childhood trauma when it comes to sex and our own neurodiversity when we see our own kids. As a therapist and working with families and supporting your families, it is family management and supporting a balanced lifestyle in those ways with the information we have. I mean, the cell phones, when I just tell parents that cell phones are crack cocaine and you're giving them the porn industry, which is right down the street in Van Nuys and, California, it's just like, I mean, I worked at a very progressive school where we had the most incredible professional development and teacher training. And we would have experts from around the country come talk, like Dr. Lisa Damore, like just so many, including a professor who studies sex and porn and the dopamine in the brain and how the screens create a delusion for everything. So sex and intimacy and relationships, yeah, that's of course, that's why we're here. It's why we're existence. It goes back all into the human being study too. So it's just like, you can't have all these conversations and just exclude by choice.
Well, and it gets back to, and this applies to sex and education and really sort of mental health coaching journey anyway, is that we've become such a one-click society that when kids have to work for something, and it's easy to say that they can't, right? Gen Alpha can't work. I disagree. I see my kids work hard every day. I think that they haven't built those muscles. They haven't practiced that. When it gets hard, they don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
Right. And as one of my kids said to me, he's like, Dr. Matt, why would I go about trying to meet someone that I like and find attractive, develop a relationship with them, ask them out, risk being told no? And then even if it does go well and she says, sure, then I have to go out with her and I have to figure out how that works. He's like, internet porn is always here. And I'm like, you are absolutely right. It's a reality for these kids because you're pitching them on some sort of nebulous idea that I promise you this thing that takes a lot more work and is not guaranteed of success is better somehow.
And we're talking about rejection sensitivity disorder. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh. It's so challenging. And Jake, we talk about this all the time when we talk about our clients, right? So many parents and administrators will say things like, well, this kid just won't do it. And I'm like, no, this kid can't. I'm not saying they can't do it forever, but they can't do it right now.
At this moment, the here and the now, in the present. Yeah.
And it's wild to me how we somehow take these young kids and treat them as like they should be finished products, right? The adultification of kids you mentioned before. Well, how come this 11-year-old doesn't have study skills? Because they're 11.
But they're gifted.
Yeah. This is when I knew I had to write a book, when you have the same conversations over and over with parents. And I'm like, I guess nobody's getting the memo. And I have to write a book and just say, here's a book, read page 52. I mean, truly, that's what pushes you into, okay, this is my calling, is to also share what I've learned and the strategies that have worked in all these situations in supporting the quality of a student's life so that they can aim for their dreams and see their goals come out with certainty and completion. And that's what gives us the heart to do it again and to do it again and to do it again. I mean, this is why 40% of Did you hear about that British study? Like 40% of the self-made millionaires are dyslexic, and the common factors were because of the grit, the determination of falling down so many times since grade school, like you and I in the 90s.
90s.
How we ever forget bringing that trauma back up? I mean, these kids talk about it all. It's just a crazy phenomenon with social media. They all diagnose themselves. They have ADHD study groups. It's the cutest thing. And yet parents would still call and say, well, we don't want them talking about themselves in that way. It's just so amazing how many parents and schools have their structure of knowing how they want to dictate the student journey. And that's just not how it goes.
The word dictation,
Control.
I'm sorry, the word control, right, I talk about this all the time. It's the paradox of control. The more you think you're controlling a kid, the more you're pushing them towards other pathways, right?
Correct.
We guide them. We say, here are the options available to you. Each one of them comes with pros and cons. Like, you could absolutely cheat on your neighbor. And that comes with an elevated risk is that you get caught and you get detention.
Yeah.
You could study for 6 days, Adderall and espresso, and you might get an A on the test. You also might have a heart attack at the age of 9.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's about balancing them. And that's that thing before about honoring them as their own hero's journey.
Yes. Yeah. Because the power is always from within, as Glenda the Good Witch says.
Are we going to start singing Wicked right now? Because
I could. We could.
Jake, give us a C minor.
I'm not that kind of musician. I'll give you rhythms. That's about it.
We can do rhythms, right? Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. And that's why I love that modern toolbox is just simple. And in the moment of distress, it's that window of tolerance if we're over or under. And many times students are over and parents are over or under. And then that window is an opportunity to make an effective change, to observe, see, tell the truth, and take authentic action. And just using that as just a baseline of making growth towards your goals. And that, I don't know, I just got so sad and tired of all the tears and the frustration and the students spiraling with anxiety and stress. So many students have therapists and psychiatrists, and they don't have tools in the here and the now. And, just waiting to show up to therapy to then learn, no, it's taking the tools and the skills and practicing them throughout the week. What is working for me? What's not working for me? I always say, Miss Chase needs 10 hours of sleep or I just can't function. I've always known that about me. I have more sensory issues that I know now at 42 than I've ever realized in my life. So learning about yourself never ends, and your profile is going to shift and change as you evolve as a human. Some things are temporary, some things are permanent. My chapter 8 is the unexpected student journey. This is about death, divorce, drugs, and disease. So I'm just excited to share, how do you support somebody looking through all the stages of life, not just getting into college, because we know so much more than that golden Willy Wonka ticket.
Oh man. And I feel like, to bring it all the way back to the race to nowhere, right? The kids all think they're going to grab that golden ticket right before they fall off the cliff. And the worst thing about it is you end up hearing a lot of stories that propagate the myth of the golden ticket, right? The one kid who got into all the Ivy League schools. And it's like, those kids are the ultra exception rarities.
Right.
I feel like it's really irresponsible to put that messaging out there, because it tells kids like that sometimes good things just happen, and it cuts out the hard work and the self-efficacy part of it that we know is so vital to this work.
Definitely. Like, I just tell students, the brain is attracted to negativity bias. And so that's the type of information that it's going to seek and want. I was College Board and ACT's accommodations coordinator for 10 years during the Varsity Blues scandals in LA. So you're going to, I'm definitely writing about that in my book, because you can't believe how much neurodiversity was targeted during that time. And it says so much about our culture and our systems and our policies and money and privilege. And, there are 6 life's energies: money, time, physical vitality, relationship, enjoyment, and creativity. So when you know that all of life's energies goes through those 6 forms, and then we talk about college, admissions. We talk about high stakes tests, or, a lot of parents just see it as a status social symbol, currency. They're not really looking at the student journey. So I guess that's what makes me very different in terms of an educational consultant and a life coach, is that it's looking at the hero's journey, as we've been talking about, because there's just really no other way into fostering and supporting resilience and independence. 56% of our youth don't have faith in humanity.
Yeah.
I sponsored Dr. Dan Siegel last year at UCLA, and he spoke to all of the therapists in Los Angeles. And it was the first event in person since the pandemic. And he said, there's one word that we were never trained and talked about ever in school. And it's such a shame, and it's going to be a disservice to humanity. And he said that was the L word, love. And so it was just a beautiful moment, because it was like the universe telling me that I was on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear a world-renowned medical psychiatrist to talk to all the therapists about all the things that I love and know to be true, and what I've been doing with students all along.
Dr. Siegel is a hero in many ways for me, so I am envious of that. But it's really at the core of this work, and I think this is why we're always aligned with teachers, is that fundamentally it's about connections. It's about authenticity, right? Can you sit in a room with somebody and say, I see you, I'm here with you, and whatever comes our way, we'll navigate it together, and say that in a way that that person sitting across from you goes, yeah, I believe you. There's a lot of bullshit out there, but I'm going to...
You need the bullshit test.
Yeah, screw the Turing test. I want the bullshit test, right? I want, like, do
you have that test?
Right. We're working on it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I want to know what I'm getting. And ultimately, on the other side of love is faith.
Yes.
Right. And we mentioned spirituality before.
Yes. Yes.
Ultimately, you are putting your faith in people like us and saying, this person is going to love my kid or love my adult or love my person in a way that's going to help them see the best versions of themselves. And honestly, there's no bigger honor than that. It's just when a parent looks at you and goes, I need you to help my kid, and say, I've got you. Right? That's a profound moment.
Well, one of the principles for success is support. And support, we always think it's one way, but support is actually both the giving and the receiving of. And you can't be complete and you can't be successful. And as I tell my students and families that I work with, there's no superhero who's done it alone to save the world, to solve a problem, right? No one does it alone. So you may not have the support in your family or at your school, because I do hear so many stories. We all come from different places and opportunities. But if you look closely, like Mr. Rogers says, find the people that are the helpers, because they are there. And that energy is so much more powerful than any medication, than any accommodation. And I know that to be true, because I wouldn't be here, because I've had so many mentors and support. Because you can't be your better self unless somebody can see you and the roadblocks on the side and before you and behind you and support you, not help. I love that too. In life coaching, it was very distinguished between the help versus the support, because the support, again, is the both of the giving and the receiving, because we actually get incredible satisfaction and gratitude when we support others. So when I created a peer mentoring program after school, I would train the juniors and seniors to support middle school students with their academics, social skills, signing up for a club, whatever it is. Just a wonderful program to be seen, to be heard. I would just always just say, here, do your homework in this space, have a snack, and then you can go home and you can do the things you love, like cook with your mom, take a nice bath, watch your favorite TV show, right? Just again, learning about how to use that time and that structure. But that mentorship and that seeing an older peer who went through the ranks like that other student's going to be doing, like that's how we see ourselves in the future, right? Like this is where we get inspired. This is how we become empowered, when we can hear and see others who've gone before us.
Okay. Jake, this is the time where you have to pull me back and say, hey, we wrap up questions because otherwise this will be one of those, like, it'll be the Lord of the Rings of
It
podcasts.
would be the Lord of the Rings. I told you we'd have too much fun when I heard you last night.
Especially the extended editions.
Yeah. Wait, Tolkien wrote more things? All right. So, Catie, you are fabulous and you are officially a friend of the podcast and obviously a friend to the neurodivergent community. I, for one, can't wait for your book. We wrap up every podcast with three things. Jake and I always have a final question we always ask. And then we want you to say one more thing about you, right? One thing you want to leave our listeners with. I'll kick it off. So, Catie, if you could have any superhero in all the superhero universes on speed dial, who would it be?
Wonder Woman, I talk about her a lot. She's who I would want to be when I grow up. Goes back to the love theme. I actually just told my own daughter, I was like, you know how I feel? Now that I'm done with life coaching school, I feel like Wonder Woman because she has armor and now that's my armor to help others. So I love that question. That's a great one.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Well, here's to Wonder Woman. Jake?
I was going to say, I love that answer too.
Thank you.
My question for you is, what's your favorite word and why? It can be a phrase, it can be a couple of words if you are like, I have three that I'm picking between.
Oh, it's a good one. Okay, I'm going to do a mom one just because it's the first thing that come to my mind. So I'm going to be authentic. Mommy's only one person. So when you're an entrepreneur, an educator, you're writing a book, you're creating content, that's a pretty good win. And I think that's more of me reminding my own brain, right? That I'm telling myself, giving myself permission that I'm just one person.
I love that.
Isn't that a great one?
Yeah.
That's for all you moms out there.
That's fantastic.
I say to my kids all the time, there's only one of me, right? I will do all the things, but there's only one of me, and thus I can only do the things in that order, right?
Yeah.
All right. So fabulous answers. Catie, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, wow. Just thank you for inviting me. This is my heart work, as you can hear. And I'm just so excited. You know, teenagers have so many hidden gifts, talents, and passion projects. And we underestimate them and can get very distracted with our own bullshit. And when we can just recenter ourselves as parents and use that modern toolbox for success and be willing as a parent to say, oh shit, I didn't eat good yesterday, or I didn't get my sleep yesterday, or I showed up unprepared or late to a business meeting. And we can normalize what it means to be human, that we aren't that far different from each other. I think that we would not be so lonely and isolated.
What a amazing thing to wrap up with. I just think that's incredible. Catie, we'd love to have you back at some point.
Yes, that would be amazing.
But thank you for the good work you do and the support. I mean, it really does feel like we're all on the same team, and that's a powerful thing.
It sure is.
All right. Well, for all of us here at the Noon Podcast, we definitely nerded out on neurodiversity today.
Sure did.
Yay. But we hope you guys have a wonderful day. Stay healthy, stay safe. Jake, any parting words?
Just to have a good one, and we will see you next time for our next guest as well. And also, obviously, that Catie, it was fantastic to meet you.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. This was such a joy. You have inspired me today so much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.